Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Between Monsters and Men. Tonight we are exploring the very haunted San Antonio, Texas, for the infamous Donkey Lady. San Antonio, Texas is the 7th largest city in the United States. It is full of history that builds on Texas' historical reputation. From the Alamo to the haunted streets and cemeteries, there's one thing for sure: you'll never get bored. One of the most infamous of San Antonio's hauntings is Donkey Lady, a woman who was deformed either before or after death, who now haunts the bridge named after her. There is no other place the Donkey Lady would rather haunt than her own bridge named after her. She's only seen at night, and in order to attract her, you must drive up onto the bridge, turn off your headlights, and wait or honk your horn a few times, or even call out her name. It has to be at night. At least, that was what I was able to find and get from these stories that I read. And even one person mentioned you'll see her at 2 a.m. But she's not your average appear and spook kind of ghost. She's aggressive. She'll make odd snorting, high-pitched snarls, shrieking, horrible screams followed with the sound of horse running. The apparition would run to cars and the attack. An attack she does. She leaps onto the car, leaving dents and breaking glass, leaving apparently damage for proof. Her eyes reflect in the moonlight, a color people describe is indescribable, and when closer, her eyes appear full of rage and hatred. When she is not on the attack, people have claimed to hear horrible screeching and screaming coming from underneath the bridge or the surrounding woods. People also say she leaves footprints behind. There are rumors running around in the 70s and 80s of an apparent number you can call where on the other end of the line, the sound of the Donkey Lady being tortured can be heard. One of the numbers that I found is Keep It 1. Another number is 221 Lady. Now, I haven't called them myself, and honestly, I prefer not to, just in case I get, the telemarketers instead. But go on ahead and try it yourself and tell me in the comments if you hear anything creepy. You cannot read a story and not find another version of it somewhere else, whether it is slightly tweaked or a completely different story. If you've read Peter Pan, you notice that if you don't read the original, each story is altered in some way. But we're not here to talk about Peter Pan. He was just an example. But no, we are here for Donkey Lady, and I've gathered what I can find of her stories told on the internet. They range quite wide for legends, not one being truly the same, and ironically, one is for sure is missing an actual donkey. I scoured the internet, a whole 17 pages on Google for these stories, and though it is not a lot, I was surprised by the lack of information I was finding. There are tons of pages on her, but with only 2 or 3 small paragraphs mentioning her. Don't get me started on the so-called evidence either. I have a separate tab for that. So let's get started because some of these legends are very curious. It was the mid-1800s. A woman, her husband, and their 2 children lived near the banks of Elm Creek. They didn't have much, barely enough to feed themselves, so what they had they cherished, to the dirt on the ground to the ceiling above their heads. But out of all the things they cherished the most were the few animals they had. They worked hard for those animals, and the horse was a prized possession, for it helped with traveling and work. One day, the son of a wealthy San Antonio merchant came riding onto their property. It is never said why he came or why he did what he did next, but after arriving, the young man came into the contact with the horse belonging to the family. The man teased the animal, hitting it with a stick. The horse defended itself, biting the merchant's son. Angered, the young man began to beat the horse severely to the point the creature cried loud enough for the couple to hear. They came rushing out from their house, and in order to distract the young man from beating, they began to throw rocks at him. The man retreated, swearing to the couple that he would return, and sure he did. That night, with a party of men, led by the son of the merchant, set the cabin on fire with torches. The man of the house broke free and attempted to distract the mob for his family to escape, but he was gunned down. It was too late. The screams of the woman and her children burning alive were heard up and down the creek for over a mile. The fire dimmed, and the mob was about to leave, when suddenly, engulfed in flames, a figure smashed through what was left of a window and staggered out towards the men. It was an ungodly creature. It was the woman. Her hands burned down to mere nubs, and her face appeared to have melted or sagged to the point that it was unnaturally long and deformed. Her clothes were burned away, leaving her skin charred black. She rushed past the men and hurled herself off the bank into the waters of Elm Creek. Her body was never found. Before we head off to the next legend, let's pick at this. I honestly can't imagine a sociopath son bring a mob just to kill a small family in that day and age. I don't know why I can see it. I wish it wouldn't be true, but it's very visible in my head. However, the legends all state that the Donkey Lady haunts Donkey Lady Bridge, and Elm Creek is a good 140 miles from Donkey Lady Bridge, the supposed haunted spot. That's 2 hours and 20 minutes away in a car. Why would anyone, dead or alive, go that distance to haunt a spot that isn't even linked to their death or tragedy? That's the odd part for this particular legend. It is a good story, and it could have happened. At least the murder. But as for it being linked to the Donkey Lady who was haunting the place is a little far-fetched for me. Back in the 1950s, there was a house fire, possibly caused by a young woman's husband. In the fire, 2 children passed, but the young woman had miraculously survived. She was left horribly disfigured. Although her face healed, the skin was left drooping and baggy in appearance, and her fingers had all fused together, leaving dark stumps that looked like hooves. Now insane from her loss and disfigurement, she terrorizes anyone who approaches her. Regardless of the lack of information given on this legend, it is one of the most used, and was even brought up in the Weird Texas book and quite a few times throughout the internet. There was no information on where the house was, if the husband survived, why he had done it, or the specific year other than it was in the 50s. We're just left with many questions. No donkey was involved. She was just disfigured. During the 1950s, there was a woman who would walk her donkey along the road to the fields near her home to let her donkey graze. For some unknown reason, a boy went to his father and claimed the woman's donkey had bit him. Instead of being rational, the boy's father and a few of his friends plotted to grab the donkey when it was being walked by the woman. They waited in the woods and jumped out as she neared, grabbing the rope from her, but she was resilient. They fought over the rope until the donkey accidentally fell into the stream and drowned. Satisfied, the men started walking away, leaving the bereaving woman with the death of her beloved pet. Upset, the woman grabbed a few rocks and started throwing them at the men, knocking one of them unconscious. The men grabbed the woman and threw her into the water where she had drowned as well. The spirit of the woman and the donkey combined into one, and now the angry spirit roams the area around the bridge. I'd throw a rock too. What irks me the most about this legend are the men. For one, instead of going after the lady and the donkey, you should be questioning your son as to why he went to a stranger to begin with. I got bit by a horse once. I didn't go running to my parents, and I'm sure if I did, they'd just tell me to get over it. A horse is a horse. It's going to bite if it's not familiar with you. You're not going to let a stranger come up to you and hug you without saying anything at all. You'd be a little off and pushy yourself. This story angers me because I can see men doing this also. Just like the whole 1800s cabin fire fiesta. Back in the 1950s, men had more of a ring over women, a tighter and more dominant grip. It was letting loose little by little, but it didn't stop them from feeling opposed by the smallest argument or the littlest animal bite. They had to show their dominance and prove they were the alphas. There was a small group of drunken teens driving along the Old Stone Ridge Road without their lights on. They ended up hitting another car, killing the children inside instantly. The mother was able to drag herself out of the flames of the wreckage, but she soon collapsed and died. The woman's spirit did not rest, and now it is believed to haunt the area, forever seeking revenge against the reckless teens. In another version, it was just the drunk teens that crashed the car, and one of the girls within the car who died turned into the vengeful spirit of Donkey Lady, who also seeks vengeance on reckless teens. I was only able to find one post of this tale. In the 1950s, a group of racist locals set a Chinese woman's house on fire that ultimately killed her children. The mother was the only survivor, but she was severely burned and would later die. Now her spirit is said to haunt the area, seeking a way to get revenge on the townsfolk. Donkey Lady is a little harder for me to believe with these house-burning tales due to the fact there aren't many houses around the small bridge. What houses that are nearby aren't terribly far away, but at a distance that makes me question as to why a ghost would go down to this bridge. As I was exploring the depths of the internet for information on her, I noticed that almost all the stories told about her mentioned cars being destroyed, glass breaking, hoods of the cars being completely dented up, and people finding hoof prints under the bridge. And out of all these sites, guess how many pictures I found on such events? Obviously none, since I haven't shown any in this video. I found one so-called picture of a hoof by Cryptomundo. The link to his website talking about his adventure is in the description. I would like to bring up the comments also mentioned on his site. A person who owns horses said that that's not a horse, mule, or donkey print at all. To me, it doesn't look like one either. I will put a comparison picture of the two to show the difference. Ironically, people claim that when they visit, their cameras go out or mess up. If they do get pictures, for some reason the pictures won't pop up, or the camera freezes or turns off when they flip to those particular pictures. It's not impossible. That happens all the time with paranormal pictures. But what about the car evidence? I haven't found one picture of these so-called cars or the damage they received from this donkey lady. You'd think they'll take a few, not just for proof, but for insurance purposes. But nothing. I looked it up specifically. I was able to find damage of a car caused by, well, just a normal donkey that a guy accidentally hit, but that was it. A donkey lady that haunts a bridge sounds pretty cool. It reminds me of the old fables of trolls under the bridge, but without the riddles and straight to the torment. When I researched her, I was full of hope that there would be pictures of damaged cars or hoof prints, but other than just one that looks like a rock that has been kicked or slid, there was nothing. What I did find was amusing as well, was the fact that the donkey lady was compared with La Llorona. Other than the two stories of losing her children, that's the only real connection between the two. We have no idea what race donkey lady is, except for one story which mentions she is Chinese. She doesn't drown her victims. She doesn't scream, cry, or speak in that matter. So it blows my mind that the amount of comments I saw on people saying that donkey lady's La Llorona is a little ridiculous. So please, in the comments, don't go saying that. I'll be a very unhappy person having to write back, and yes, I do always try to write back, and if not, like comments. Give me proof of the two are one and the same, and I might acknowledge the possibility. If you want to learn about La Llorona, go check out my video I had done on her. She was one of the first few videos I put up on this channel. Her link will be in the description and at the end of this video. Back on the donkey lady. While doing my research, I noticed that the posts I was finding were not that old, the oldest being back in 2006. However, majority of them were from 2014 to 2017. The claims of donkey lady being seen was around 70s and 80s, and I didn't find any recent sightings within the 2000s. The story was made into a creepypasta in 2013, and it was only a few paragraphs long, mostly just reciting one legend, short as it was, not well detailed and not explaining much. The fact that it was made in 2013 after the older posts in 2006, we can assume that it was first passed around before the creepypasta phase started. Though some of the legends are pretty interesting and unnerving at the same time, I don't fully believe their probability. However, I do think there was a donkey lady, and this is what I found on her. I'm not saying this is true, but I did find this on one of the many websites I searched, and it seems more logical and believable than the legends I've heard so far. This story comes from Sherilyn Flick, a woman who grew up in Windcrest, Texas. During the time period of 1960s and 1980s, there was apparently a woman named Doc Anderson. She was said to be known as Donkey Lady or Skunk Lady. She and her husband lived in a mostly undeveloped area between Windcrest and Live Oak. Doc Anderson was described as an eccentric animal lover, and the reason for her fabled names was due to the number of rare donkeys she had and her strange ability to handle skunks without getting sprayed. Sherilyn used to ride horses at a place operated by Doc Anderson back in the 1970s. At this time, Doc and her husband were in their late 60s or early 70s, lived in a two-room house they rented, and had a place for donkeys tied up in the front and the skunks under the house and up in the attic. This made Anderson a local legend, and she would have daring children ride by the gate of their rented house. Unfortunately, times began to get hard for Anderson, so Sherilyn and her family would haul water and supplies to the couple. Though Anderson would get food stamps, her and her husband would spend all their resources on their animals. However, they were out of money, and the couple were forced to move from their rented property, where they would end up setting up a squatter's shack the eastern side of Ridner Road, called the Robards, which at the time was a very forested area. This is when the legend of Donkey Lady intensified. Their shack was built out of scrap lumber, tin, cardboard, and whatever else they could find. There was no running water or electricity, and they lived like that for years. People driving along the road would see a strangely dressed, one-armed woman suddenly pop out of the woods leading donkeys to water. Sherilyn said that Anderson wasn't only just a sad figure, but a tormented one. Often, high school students would tease and harass Anderson. They would sneak up at night and cut the ropes on all the donkeys and horses, and Anderson would have to hunt them down in the woods. Sherilyn said that she saw Anderson crying one time after this had happened. Sherilyn lost track of Doc Anderson around 1977 when she went off to college. She believes that Donkey Lady of legend and the Donkey Lady from her story could have easily intertwined and merged. Others also experienced this very real Donkey Lady, especially children, since they were told that she would shoot them if they were to get too close, and that spurred the dare of riding their bikes past her rented house. It was a big thing back then. The last time Windcrest and Live Oak officials heard anything about Doc Anderson was around 1982, but other people familiar with her claim she died in the 1990s. So tell me, what do you believe? Are the legends of Donkey Lady true? Was she real and her story was morphed into a haunting unlike any other? Tell me in the comments. I read all the comments and try to get back to them as quickly as possible. Due to YouTube demonetizing videos like mine, feel free to check out my Patreon page. And if you like, join the family. I create videos on cryptids, hauntings, abductions, serious killers, and more. I'd like to thank my supporting Patreon thus far. If you may, hit that like button, comment, and please subscribe.